Assalamu alaikum. It's my pleasure to have both of you here for this interesting conversation on a topic that all of us are very interested in. So I've known you guys for what? I've known you for about 15 years now. You and I joined Lamza almost at the same time, and Ghazal, you were much later, about 5 years after we joined. And your interest in the topic is not a surprise to me. So we're going to talk about the place of spirituality in the workplace, and I'll come to the motivation behind this larger project a bit later. But pehle, a little bit about what you understand from the word spirituality. What is your interpretation of spirituality?
So, we are embodied souls, essentially. So we're mind and body at the same time. The body has certain needs, and the soul has certain needs. So I think the longing of the soul for its creator is spirituality for me.
My understanding of spirituality is that it's a word that is very misused. Everything under the sun people call spirituality, right? This is spirituality, and so I wanted to understand what true spirituality is, and is it something? How do we even define it? Because if we can't define it, how do we? Definition is the first form of experience. When we experience a reality, first we define it in terms of language. So if we can't define it properly, experiencing it would come much later. So I started reading on some of the classical thinkers on spirituality, and I started thinking, how do the earlier individuals have defined? And I started even reading about multiple religions. So what is the different religious perspective on spirituality, and what is the different schools of thought of spirituality? And then I realized something very important, that it is a serious endeavor. It is not something that is taken lightly. Only in the modern culture, spirituality has become something to be taken lightly, something flimsy, something fluff.
Almost like a lifestyle, जैसे हम कहते हैं ना, marketing में, ये lifestyle, वो lifestyle, so it's like a...
Absolutely, almost like eating an ice cream, for example. So it's spirituality is my flavor of ice cream. Like I find joy in ice cream. Some people find joy in spirituality. So it's nothing. It's not an endeavor. It's not a. Yeah. And I was that's how I came across spirituality in the modern context. And then I realized that, wait a minute, what the classicals were calling spirituality and what we are experiencing spirituality may be two very different things. And that's how I got interested in the discipline of spirituality. And as the podcast unfolds, we can discuss what the classicals call spirituality.
नहीं, मैं तो अभी पूछने लगा था, क्योंकि because it's a contested term और इसकी एक evolutionary journey, and in modern times, like you said, it's interpreted in a very different way. So I think शुरू में जो classical view है, what is like Ghazal ने जो कहा. So what's your understanding?
I think what Dr. Ghazal said is basically the foundation of it, very foundation. So classical views we both, and let me share one view. The simplest view, and that I like the most because it's the most practical view, and Dr. Ghazal also explained that. And that view is that spirituality is the need of the individual which cannot be fulfilled with any other means. That need can only be fulfilled with a particular set of means. The classicals call that need, what the word Dr. Ghazal used is a yearning, a longing. So spirituality, they said, is a very intrinsic need of the individual, to an extent that you can basically veil that need, or a better word is suppress that need. For example, we suppress our biological needs. Right? So in the modern society, it seems is suppressing that need. So it can be suppressed, but it does not go. So it's a thing.
Modernity, it's the accelerating process of shoveling materialism in to fill a hole that had to be filled with spirituality.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's right.
So the moment you call it something innate, and suddenly now it takes a very different perspective. Now something fluff, something add-on. So it's not the ice cherry on the cake; it's the cake itself.
I think that's very important. Like you said, that human beings have a body and a soul, but I think what both of you are saying is the needs of the soul are the most important needs, and the others are sort of less important.
I'll tell you something. When you call it the need of the soul, you're still othering it. In the sense that people say, I don't believe in the soul.
The asal of a human being is the soul. That's so the real need is
the human. So even if you don't use the word soul, for example, this need would still be there. It's a thing that would be present. Sure. It's as important as eating. That's how the classicals perceived the idea of spirituality. So it's a need. And then they said, if it's a need and if it's real, how do we fulfill it? That's the two questions.
Excellent. तो थोड़ा सा ये भी बताएं कि what was your journey up to this point? हर बंदा spirituality में एक खास pathway से पहुंचता है. So आप दोनों का क्या था? What was?
Yeah. So. Like we say, La ilaha illallah. So the La, the negation is the one that for me has taken the longest time, the unlearning, because I am a product of a secular household, a secular culture. And so it took a long time, and I'm still on that journey of unlearning. There were a couple of events, focusing events. One of them was September 11th. So when the Twin Towers came down, I was a young person in the U.S., and suddenly I was a target. I may have been connected to the terrorists. So it was very uncomfortable to be Muslim at that time. And many of the young people around me said, we don't have to be. And we didn't have the foundation to either stay on or leave. It was interesting because at that time then I also got to know people who were just ordinary Americans who were being told that every Muslim is a terrorist. So they started to learn about the religion more than figure out who these Muslims are. And some of them became Muslims. And so I came to know them. And I was just fascinated by the fact that they were learning about Islam, because that was something that I didn't even know you could do. What is there to learn about Islam? You're born Muslim, you die Muslim. And so then I started to learn with them, and they started to teach me. And so that was a really important point. And I think that's when that journey truly began. And I came upon a book on spirituality, the spirituality of women. And I was very surprised about that, written by a Muslim woman convert from California. So those things, and then when I came to Lums...
I've seen that book. It's...
by Camille Hemsky, yes.
Sohail Academy published.
No, it's called Sufi Women in Islam. Yeah.
A copy from Sohail Academy.
Oh, that's great. So you were one of the people that, that I bumped into. And who talked about his own journey, and I became interested in your teacher. And so I think that was important. So you were a significant player. And then I think the third thing was COVID. COVID was a great time because we were isolated and we had to fill up that time. And so I think that's when a lot of that introspection, learning,
Saad?
Without deflecting it, my experience is every individual is on a spiritual journey. The difference is one of intensity, and the difference is one of awareness. Because if we make it a need, which is very intrinsic to ourselves, that does not mean that only some people would experience that need. So, and that the intensity could be different. For example, some people have a bigger appetite, some people have a smaller appetite.
And the yearning
The yearning key appetite is there could be a difference in appetite. Some people are not aware of their appetite yet. But that appetite, that yearning is there in every individual. Hence, in their own way, everyone is experiencing this yearning. And this yearning, like most people, this yearning is the start of the journey, where So the journey of spirituality starts with a dissatisfaction. You're dissatisfied about something. Like Dr. Ghazal was dissatisfied about the experience that she was getting. Right? The experience of who she was is now being challenged. So there is a dissatisfaction that arises. It always starts with the dissatisfaction. Because if a person is completely fulfilled, then spirituality would not have existed. We would not have been talking about it.
Fulfilled or distracted?
Yes.
If a person is completely distracted or fulfilled?
That's very interesting. Distraction can give you a temporary
relief
to that, the yearning that exists.
Or at least you feel that you are...
Yes, you can repress it. For example, if you're hungry, you can repress that. So repression is within the human spectrum. But that doesn't mean it goes away. It comes back. It's there. It's a thing that looks at... There's an abyss that looks back at you. So that's the... And what happens is, in that space, you're trying to go. So there are two things that happen in the classical scholars, and my personal experience in very limited ways is very similar as well. And people that I've met, their experiences are very similar as well. So the first thing that happens is, there is a dissatisfaction, but you can't put your finger to it. You say, could it be my relationship? Could it be my wealth? Could it be my social circle? Could it be because my grades
work
are
not being meaningful, which is often a very modern sort of...
Absolutely. Could it be that I'm not experiencing work? Could it be that I lack power? Could it be that I'm part of a society which is... So different notions appear. And then when you examine each notion, you say, it could be that, but it's not it. And that's what arises, and that's what then... So when you can't put a finger, so you're experiencing something and you can't put a finger to it, that's the typical syllabus, that's the typical step.
Some people go through a process of elimination.
Yes.
They try and experience fulfillment through each of these routes and then not find anything, and then eventually come to that realization that maybe there's something else.
Absolutely, that's their journey. So that's part of their journey. They're also traversing a journey, eliminating something. What if I become the CEO of the company now? Now what? Okay, still I'm feeling that. What if I become the most richest person in the world? What if I have meaningful relationships now? I've got a meaningful relationship. Now what? Still there is, what do I put my hand to? So what is left then? It is in that space which society cannot put its finger on, spirituality exists. And that's the space spirituality says, now we have a different set of rules to traverse it. And then it gives its own set of rules. And that was my experience as well. That's it. I couldn't put a finger to it. But I knew that it's something to be experienced. And that's how it started.
Excellent. So mera ye hai ke, and I'm not claiming any spiritual station. मैं ये कह रहा हूँ जहाँ भी हूँ I think my teacher once said something and it really I thought okay, this is what's happened to me, and he says when he wants you to come to him, either you can go willingly in garlands of mercy or he'll pull you towards himself in chains of tribulation. And without going into the details, I think I'm the chains of tribulation pathway, and I feel that I was like pulled because of difficulties that so interesting sabka
if I ask you the difficulties, for example, two people would have handled those difficulties very differently. What if beyond the difficulties there was something more that the individual is seeking?
So I think he also creates the circumstances that push you towards a certain direction. You meet people at various points in time who nudge you into a specific direction because he wants you to go into that direction. तो मुझे तो हमेशा वही लगता है कि मैंने शायद कुछ भी नहीं किया. It's just that circumstances nudged me to a certain pathway.
What did you find in that direction? An inner peace, a fulfillment? So
नहीं, ये कहना तो बहुत मुश्किल है कि वो फौरन मिल जाती है, लेकिन at least the realization that perhaps that...
This is such a strong word, realization. I think that's... And the classicals have used this word. They've said, what happens? Suddenly you get a realization. Not many people get this realization. Realization is it's not something to be. It's not something small.
Yeah.
Suddenly you get a realization. I have to do this.
जो आपने क्या word बोला था जब मैं शुरू में आया था? GPT versus. Said ये आपको कहाँ से आए थे? Varid. So that realization is that it's just a.
And that realization, when it comes, then suddenly it becomes the basis of your action. Mm-hmm. Now, when that realization is in part of your consciousness, so we're talking about conscious beings here. And the moment this realization is part of the conscious experience, then your action becomes, now I can't do without it.
Right.
I have to do that. Otherwise, why would smart people do something which does not bring any money, which does not bring any fame, where, there is no immediate set of joys that a person experiences, but there is a realization, right? And that realization becomes the source of one's action.
So,
though I think joy comes also. Spirituality and joy are deeply connected. Right. It's an addiction. It's a joy because you are suddenly locked in with what you had been, on a journey. I'm not saying that you've arrived like he's saying, but the locking in.
Absolutely. I mean, joy for me are the milestones. It helps you stay on the journey. Mm-hmm. Because if you remain completely joyless, that journey becomes almost impossible.
Right.
So suddenly you experience forms of joy that tells you, you're on the right track.
Right.
It's never a perpetual joy, but it gives you those experiences of joy, meaning and fulfillment where you realize, I think I'm on the right track. And these are gifts from the divine.
Right. And they're unexpected. Yeah. You don't know when you're getting them.
Absolutely.
But it's so interesting that you baat kar rahe hain, and the gifts come in very different shapes. Mm-hmm. So, ek to joy hai na, some people, and I know those people who when contemplate God, they feel joy. And sometimes the spiritual risk just comes through people. You don't experience joy directly, but Allah fills your life with people who are a source of joy, and those people are spiritually very inclined. So kabhi-kabhi ye bhi hota hai. Aur wo aapne kaha na, those are all to encourage you. So the encouragement comes in different forms.
In the classical scholars were very clear about it. They said, there would be gifts on the way to keep you motivated.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this journey would be it would be very difficult to experience.
Wow.
But these gifts are not the purpose.
These gifts are not the purpose.
That's what they also argue, that these are gifts of the purpose. So experience them, be thankful for these gifts. Be thankful that even for a moment you have experienced that fulfillment.
That's right.
And then keep on going.
Excellent. अच्छा ये बताएं, ठीक है, spiritual journey हो गया. How does spirituality impact your work? Because, आप दोनों इस यूनिवर्सिटी में प्रोफेसर हैं, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव काम भी करते हैं, people report to you, you teach students, you have colleagues. How does spirituality affect the way we deal with each and every kind of situation, especially in the workplace?
So the workplace is essentially in the modern, jaise Saad ne explained kiya, in our modern life, it's become a secular space where we're not supposed to talk about or not even bring our spiritual selves to the workplace. It becomes difficult for people who are locked into their spiritual selves to have to kind of, parda dale on part of themselves. Which I, feel is an unnatural thing because, like you're saying, classically or just a few decades ago, it wasn't that way. But now it is. And so I see a lot of desolation around us. And not just here at LUMS because, a lot of my work takes me, I have colleagues who are my age, who are not in this country, in other countries, but across the board I see this desolation. And so I think that we're living in unnatural circumstances, and that's what's leading to a lot of stress, unnecessary hardships that we've placed on ourselves. But I think that I'm just done with that. I'm no longer, ready to accept the status quo. And so now in whatever I do, I have started to, maybe it's an age factor, that I don't care. I just say that I need to bring my full self, to my classroom, to my research, to my conversations with colleagues. I'm going to be my full self. And so far, I've not gotten into trouble. So let's...
If you weren't spiritually inclined, how would you have behaved with your colleagues and your students? And now that you are, how do you behave?
Right.
I mean, what do you think? What's the difference between
So now, when I'm
two ghazals?
The two ghazals. So now when I meet people, I also assume that they are not just an embodied, person, that they also have a soul. So now when I talk to people, whether they are Muslims or not Muslims, atheists or believers, young people or older people, I treat them as full selves. I am talking to their souls as well as their bodies. And I'm concerned about their souls as well as their bodies. I think that's what's changed.
And what about workplace challenges? How do you, or metrics of achievements in your case, A paper, wo flana, teaching evaluations, or administrative challenges.
Right.
How do you, respond to those as a...
They matter less now because the soul doesn't get excited about the same things that, say, the body does, or the mind does. And at the same time, disappointments also matter a little less because, then you see the larger picture and you can't see the larger picture. You know that you're only able to look through a peephole at this point. And so you kind of give up on trying to micromanage your life or other people's lives. Yeah.
But does that impact your effort towards these activities, or do these activities still get their due, but the consequences matter less? If you know what I mean.
They still matter because now when I'm putting in an effort, I'm putting it as my full self. So now when I do my teaching or writing, I'm only doing that which is meaningful.
Saad?
Let's explore this. This is a very important question because at the end of the day, people would be interested in how do you bring spirituality to the workplace. So if you allow, we can explore it in different steps and different aspects of spirituality in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So, for example, first, the person as an individual, as part of a team, and as a leader. So let's individual, manager, leader, let's call it that. Three aspects of spirituality, because otherwise the question then arises, is there a place for spirituality in the workplace?
Yeah.
Is it something personal? I do it after 5 and before 9. Is that the space of spirituality, or do we bring spirituality 9 to 5? Or if I bring it in an individual space.
And if you bring it, is it a good thing for the workplace or not?
Is it a good thing? How would the workplace? How would it affect the workplace? Good, bad. And that's a topic that in academic circles, that's a topic we should seriously pursue, and organizations, and not a lot of people understand that. Mm-hmm. And there is no blueprint. There is how do I navigate these challenges? There are aspects, because the world, in the classical traditions, there are aspects of personal navigation. But how do we navigate managerial relationships? How do we navigate leadership relationships? Let me start. Dr. Ghazal has spoken as. Let me add to what she has said, because what she has said becomes very important. Suddenly, when I was hearing her, it seems that the first thing that spirituality does, it makes you more authentic. So now what she was saying is that if it's not meaningful for me, I don't do it.
Again, a contested word, थोड़ा authentic का भी मुझे बता दें, क्योंकि modern times में authentic का बिल्कुल एक different मतलब है.
आपके ज़हन में क्या मतलब है authentic का?
मैं क्योंकि from an identity perspective, authenticity की बात करते हैं, and it is very varied and usually understood in lifestyle choices, in which it's very surface level conversation. I'm authentically adventure seeking or वगैरह. So authentic in your term क्या, in the sense मुझे लगता है ये नफ्स है. So जब modern terms में authenticity की बात होती है, it's talking about आपका नफ्स सबसे ज़्यादा क्या चीज़ चाहता है, and that is who you are. But when you use the word authentic, I feel it's something very different.
Very good. So the way I've read spiritual traditions defining authenticity is the space where the person's awareness about who the person is, because at the end of the day, spirituality deals with the question of who am I. Once you have discovered the question of who am I, or since it's a question that cannot be discovered completely, it's also a journey of discovery. Whatever you have discovered about your true self, let me use the word true, which is a multifactorial phenomena. Whatever you have discovered about your true self, you live your life according to that. That's an authentic self. And if you're living your life in conflict with what you have discovered about your true self, then you're not living an authentic existence. Now, there's a possibility that your discovery of yourself is incomplete. And the spiritual traditions argue that if your discovery is incomplete, part of you would be aware of that. So when you are trying to impose a certain persona, you're doing zulm on the self. The first zulm that a person does is on the self, because a person is assuming a particular persona. That persona is because of society. I won't look good because society claps for a certain kind of thing. Society claps for a particular form. I should take that form. Or because my immediate friends, my group that I belong to claps for a particular form, I should take that form. That's the biggest challenge. But deep down, there is that conflict that would arise.
I think what we started with was that the core self is the soul. The other parts of the human being are less important. Core self is. And then we know from our religious tradition what our true nature is. The Prophet is closer to you than your jugular vein. That's your true nature. So what is that true nature?
Let me make it more fundamental than the soul. Because soul is also a word that we have created. People who understand language, it's a phenomena that we have created. We have given it personified in a particular way. Again, if I remove all these terminologies, and I say, what is left? If I go away of all the terminologies, there is an experience of the self which cannot be denied. Everyone experiences themselves. There is something to be Adnan, there is something to be Ghazal, there is something to be X, there is something to be Saad. So that first person, without all the doctors, the professors, everything aside, there is something to be me. Everyone experiences that. There is something to experience when I eat food. Someone is experiencing that. That first person experiences, that's the start of spirituality. That first person experience, where does it come from? And what is the limit of my first person experience? Why? And that's how spirituality gets anchored. Now, the moment you bring shields around it, you're denying that first person experience to yourself. The moment you're living someone else's life, the moment you're living with a set of ideals that have been given to you, you're denying that first person experience. So that's what the spirituality, and if you ask me, if there is one thing, I like to find common patterns in common data patterns. Some of my work is empirical as well. And I said, what is one thing that is common between all religions and all spiritual traditions? Simple question I asked. One thing that is common between all of them. So if I do a regression analysis, there is a single line that runs through all the data points. What is that? Everyone talks about the idea of I am. That there is a conscious awareness that is within you. And that conscious awareness, some spiritualists would call, and interestingly, that conscious awareness is not a material awareness, and this is called the hard problem of science, that where does consciousness comes from? Now, religious traditions call that consciousness comes from the soul. And spiritual, non-religious, material traditions call that consciousness, we do not know where it comes from.
The mind and brain problem. Right?
The mind and brain problem. They do not tell where it comes from. They have no answer to that. So they say, but we do not know. So there is, in that space of not knowing and knowing, is the dance of spirituality. So as an individual, first, when I embrace my conscious existence and I know that I'm a conscious being and I'm capable of conscious experiences, that's the fundamental that one starts from. And then all other rules that I've picked, that the brain has picked. I mean, these are all rules that the brain has picked. If I don't do this, someone's going to beat me up. If I do that, someone is going to give me a reward, right? So the Pavlovian effect that I've picked up, when I start to realize that, if I don't like a particular Pavlovian effect, I don't have to live by that Pavlovian.
लेकिन strip away, सब कुछ हटा दो तो असल है क्या?
I am. That's the only thing.
What's the nature of that essence?
That's the question. That's the spiritual journey. What is the nature of that? And that's where you receive multiple realizations. And those realizations are also first person realizations, in the sense that if I tell you this is what it is, it will be meaningless for you if you've not experienced it.
Generalizable बिल्कुल नहीं.
Generalizable अगर है भी तो ऐसे होगा अगर मैंने आपको बताया कि realization में ये होता है और आप, it's like if I tell you what an ice cream tastes like, you will never. So all those realizations are until they are experienced in the self by that aware being, that ultimate knowing. Then there is. So that's the first person. I think that's till the time you realize that. If you realize your set of rules and simply an outcome of a byproduct of do this, do that, do this, do that, then it becomes problematic to live. So that's how I see as a conscious, soulful individual.
अच्छा फिर back to that, क्योंकि हम एक digression में चले गए बहुत लंबी. You as an individual,
it's a very
you as an individual, you as a team member, and you as a leader. That's what you were going to talk
second,
about.
Second, individual, suddenly the person has discovered कि मैं हूँ, कुछ है, which is not simply मैं भी हूँ. So once the individual has discovered that, then the individual becomes part of the team, and then the individual starts to perceive the other कि मैं भी हूँ और वो भी है.
जैसे गजल ने कहा, understanding everyone as a complete whole with the soul and
absolutely. और वो जो है वो कोई टेबल नहीं है. फर्स्ट पर्सन एक्सपीरियंस है. अब मैं उससे रिलेट करूंगा अपने एक्सपीरियंस के ऊपर. जब मैं हूं और मैंने सफरिंग एक्सपीरियंस की है, वो है, वो भी सफर करता है. देयर इज अ कॉमन एक्सपीरियंस दैट हैज मेड अस शेयर्ड लिविंग क्रिएट हो गई. दिस पर्सन ऑल्सो नो सफरिंग. तो जब मैं उसको डांटूंगा, उसको मारूंगा, उसको तंग करूंगा, उसका राइट उससे छीन लूंगा, तो वो सफर करेगा.
लेकिन ये मजा नहीं आया, क्योंकि देखो ये चीज तो कोई भी बंदा जो साइकोलॉजिकली थोड़ा सारा कह लो एजुकेटेड हो कि उसको पता है. सो व्हाट्स द डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ स्पिरिचुअल पर्सन एंड अ पर्सन हु इज वेरी वेल रेड इन
स्पिरिचुअलिटी में क्या फर्क है और इसको हम कैसे इसको, दैट्स द क्वेश्चन. आई मीन वी नीड टू एक्सप्लोर. दैट्स व्हाई आई सेड दिस, ऑल दीस थिंग्स नीड टू बी फर्दर एक्सप्लोर्ड. देखें, जिसने एक्सपीरियंस की है ना सफरिंग, and the person knows the experience of suffering, then that person would become automatically ना two options emerge होते हैं उसके पास. या वो बहुत मीन बन जाता है, कहता है कि मैंने सफरिंग की है तो अब मैं दूसरों को सफर कराऊं, या वो बहुत मर्सीफुल बन जाता है. ये उसकी चॉइस है. इन दोनों में से मैंने, जिसने एक्सट्रीम सफरिंग एक्सपीरियंस की है, एक्सट्रीम मीननेस और एक्सट्रीम कंपैशन में से एक चीज, या वो वली बन जाता है या फिर वो मॉन्स्टर बनता है. That's what happens in the space of extreme suffering. Now, extreme suffering का एक aspect mind, brain भी experience करता है. At the end of the day, neurons तेजी से fire करेंगे ना जब suffering होगी, right? Confusion में neurons तेजी से fire. So brain, लेकिन brain का experience of suffering is a very small experience of suffering. Brain का experience of suffering is like eating an ice cream, pricking. The knowing of suffering, so experiencing, who is the one that experiences? It's the self that experiences. It's the soul that experiences. It's my higher consciousness that experiences. तो अगर मैं खाली ब्रेन होता ना, तो ब्रेन को इजीली अगर मैं खाली ब्रेन होता तो मैं इजीली इसको कंडीशन करके ना अपनी सारी सफरिंग को खत्म कर देता. अगर मैं आपकी सारी मेमोरीज उड़ा दूं ना, you would still know the feeling of suffering. Why? Because you've suffered. Now, how is that? I mean, if I'm purely the brain, I can completely, I can rewire the brain. We have technology to rewire the brain. It's so, I mean, it's become very easy these days. And with Neuralink, we'll be able to rewire the brain. But let me throw a hypothesis out there. Even if we'll be able to rewire the brain, the sufferer, people will still know the suffering.
The subjective experience of of suffering will remain.
Will remain because
अच्छा,
something
फिर
other than the brain has experienced.
ठीक है, तो फिर आगे इसका इफेक्ट आपकी इंटरेक्शन.
अब मैं इंटरैक्ट करूंगा नॉट एज अ ब्रेन बट एज अ डीपर एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ सफरिंग. अब मुझे दूसरे की भी सफरिंग को की रियलाइजेशन, साइकोलॉजिकल सफरिंग की रियलाइजेशन होगी 1, सोल सफरिंग की रियलाइजेशन होगी 100. That's the difference. The person would be able to be more conscious of the other compared to someone who's only experienced a psychological phenomena, which can be rewired. Psychological phenomena easy rewiring होती है, spiritual phenomena में rewiring नहीं होती. It happens. There is 2 forms of knowing emerges. Either the monster comes out or the compassionate ones comes out. There's a possibility that the monster.
So you're saying ज़्यादा empathy, ज़्यादा compassion,
significantly ज़्यादा, not just one standard death.
और ये I think the interesting distinction होगी कि ये बड़ा authentic empathy होगी. एक empathy होती है जो हमें सिखाई जाती है कि आपको empathetic होना चाहिए, and a lot of people express that, but somebody who's spiritually inclined, उसकी empathy बड़ी sincere होगी.
Absolutely sincere भी होगी, significant भी होगी. There is a possibility, और हो सकता है वो manifest अपने तरीके से करे, वो manifest social circle के मुताबिक ना करे, because everyone's makeup is different. हो सकता है there is a possibility कि अगर वो spiritual ना होता, वो बहुत बड़ा monster होता और बहुत ही मीन होता, और उस मीननेस से वो थोड़ी सी एम्पैथी दिखाने लग गया. लोग कहते हैं तो बहुत थोड़ी एम्पैथी दिखा रहा है.
स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट,
नॉट रियलाइजिंग कि वो उसके लिए
ये बहुत ही डिफिकल्ट.
ये जो आपने बात की है, इस पे हम ये कह सकते हैं कि बट वी से we've seen a lot of very mean religious people, and you're saying that spiritual people have a high likelihood of not being monsters. So just clarify that, because this is what I hear a lot. No, but very quickly, if you can very quickly just explain that.
The meanness of religiosity is a psychological meanness. When a person assumes a certain level of superiority, कि मैं ऐसे बेहतर हूँ because I'm more godly than the other, that is complete and antagonistic with spirituality. Spirituality में अगर कोई अपने religion की वजह से superiority claim करता है, उसने spirituality का पहला step भी नहीं traverse किया. कोई कहता है अच्छा because मैं बहुत नेक हूँ या मैं बहुत दीनदार हूँ. So that is where meanness of religiosity की जो meanness है ना वो आती है. When a person takes a certain every meanness, and you understand, emerges from a power difference, and this could be a psychological or a conscious power difference where a person says I am superior, and that's the start of the satanic Iblis ने भी कहा था मैं superior. So wherever someone claims a certain level of superiority, you'll find कि वो spirituality से दूर जा रहा है. Whenever you claim a certain level of infusion with a higher experience, where the self is being negated, you're getting closer to spirituality.
I think बड़ा आपका interesting सवाल है कि religiosity और spirituality में क्या difference है. And I think spirituality is the inner dimension of religiosity. You can be very religious without being spiritual. And I think that spirituality is your state of being with Allah. And not all religious people have that state. And I feel if you have that state, then you can't be mean. मैं थोड़ा सा वर्क प्लेस के सवाल पे भी ना मुझे मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग स्पिरिचुअलिटी की एक ये भी है कि the word taqwa. I think spirituality also means just this constant awareness of Allah watching you. ये कहना बहुत आसान है. I mean हमें हमेशा बचपन से ही बताया जाता है कि अल्लाह देख रहा है. But living with that realization alive in every moment will change you as a person. And for me in the workplace, when somebody is spiritually very alive, it would mean, मेरे साथ नहीं है, लेकिन it would mean that every interaction is done knowing that I am being watched. And the being who's watching me, I want that being's pleasure and rida. And every action then becomes very different. And that's what I would say कि वो जो दोनों चीज़ों को वो करता है ना, you can be religious without this awareness, and then you slip into meanness and all kinds of other things.
A spiritual person, in terms of work life, would be able to take decisions जो कि आम इंसान नहीं ले सकता, मुश्किल फैसले भी वो कर सकेगा.
स्ट्रेस उसको, you know, making decisions under duress आपकी रैशनल कैपेसिटी को वैसे ही सीरियसली हार्म करता है. एंड अ स्पिरिचुअल पर्सन मे बी एबल टू, जैसे आपने शुरू में कहा ना, आउटकम्स डोंट अफेक्ट मी एज मच, एंड देन वो एक
स्पिरिचुअल पर्सन अपने दोस्तों को भी नाराज कर सकता है एंड लिव विद इट.
Not just empathy, but there's this justice ka element and fairness ka element as well.
Right.
That they will not just be empathetic; they'll be very fair and very just. Acha, so
that is required at leadership level. So isko transition kare na leadership pe. Leadership pe mushkil faisle. If you're not spiritual, you're going to lose your head.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to live. And leadership is a very lonely pursuit. Spirituality is a training towards that loneliness, by the way, as well.
Right.
All of us understand that, right?
Right.
So the moment if you are spiritual, suddenly you can stand alone as well, and you can stand. The best part is, if there's a very interesting quote: if you stand alone, either you're a monster or you're divine. That's what that's an English quote, right? And spirituality says, and that's. Most people who stand alone we see as monsters. I mean, they're not fit to do.
Right.
Spiritual person has the ability to stand alone and do things which the person feels. And if you look at the lives of spiritual leaders, of our leaders, they were able to take very difficult decisions.
Yeah.
They were able to go against societal norms, for example. They were able to go against what the crowd around them felt in a particular way. So that's the strength. Now, how are they getting that strength? That's not a psychological strength. That's the inner strength. That's the space of spirituality. So when we need difficult decisions, we need spiritual people around.
अच्छा, difficult decisions के अलावा, Ghazal, you said something very interesting very early, that you said, I see a lot of desolation in the corporate world. I think this is true, and now you have Harvard का वो बड़ा interesting आदमी है, A.C. Brooks, who actually talks about happiness at the workplace, happiness and leadership, and now this is a priority across the world. And I read a very interesting article recently where this company, it's called Irrational Investments. What they do is they only invest in companies that have very high employee happiness levels. And they've been able to make, I think, 20% more the S&P.
Wow.
And that's what they do. They just go around in organizations, try to figure out the happiness level, and they invest in companies that have happy employees, because that is going to result in a much better organization. So, spirituality ka role in creating these organizations that are places where people experience a higher level of well-being, that seems to be a very important sort of priority today. And you feel that spirituality इसमें कैसे contribute करती है?
So I think leaders have a great role to play. When I was working in the corporate world, I had at least one boss that I remembered. I remember that the air itself would change when she would walk in. You know, she used to travel a lot. When she was there, the air would be different. It would be more difficult to breathe. So, you know, it really...
मैं समझा शायद आप दूसरे साइड की स्टोरी सुना रही हैं.
So मैं ये कह रही हूँ that, you know, the leader can really transform the environment. And when the leader is at a point where what Saad was describing...
मुश्किल सवाल पूछो. जब आप क्लासरूम में एंटर होती हैं, आपके स्टूडेंट्स क्या फील करते हैं?
ये तो उनसे पूछना चाहिए.
But what's your interpretation? Do they feel relief or do they get stressed?
ये तो उनसे पूछना चाहिए.
ठीक. अच्छा, आप बता रही थी.
So, हाँ, I mean, that is a good question. I should ask that. ये हमारे evaluations में होना चाहिए. So that was a point when I nearly left the job just because of that, because of the toxic environment. So if someone is, and that person wasn't sorted, So Wojo, when you are sorted in your head in the way that Saad was describing, then you exude light, I think. There are people around us who are pools of light, and you want to work with them. You want them to be your
and
leaders.
We've all worked with such people.
Huh?
We have worked with such people.
Yes. And hopefully in this course we'll introduce some of them to the participants. So I think that the leader's own self will radiate.
Saad?
Absolutely, I think it's spot on. And that is probably the biggest crisis in our society at the moment, which we feel spirituality can solve. It can solve the crisis of leadership, it can also solve the crisis of mental health.
Yeah.
At least because there are a lot of things we are trying which are useful, but not really working out. I'm not saying they're not useful. They're very useful because without them, life would have been even more miserable. But this is a space where it can also solve the challenge of meaning that exists in society. Spirituality. Okay, let me say something here. The claim of spirituality is, and we can judge it by it. Every discipline claims something. The claim of spirituality is, if you become spiritual, you'll be able to find meaning in your life.
And now in the happiness के ऊपर जितनी भी research है, one of the basic macro ingredient of happiness is meaning.
Yeah, and spirituality claims that you'll be able to find inner meaning. There is a space inside which is capable of meaning. And if you dig into that space deep enough, there is meaning hidden there. You have to just take it out. And it will give, that's what the claim of spirituality is. That's the claim of all spiritual thinkers. So they don't claim that you will be in a state of ecstasy all the time, but
meaning
is the claim that they do.
And this is very interesting. I do in my executive courses, मैंने एक survey बनाया हुआ that covers many dimensions of your life. It asks your work life, your health life, family life, social life. और उसमें एक सवाल है, what is your purpose of your life? And मजे की बात ये है, and I've done this with hundreds of people, that's the one question that stumps them. And a lot of them say that our life generally feels we don't have a purpose. And I think वो जो हम बात कर रहे हैं कि workplace में the importance of purpose बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया क्योंकि happiness का एक core ingredient purpose है. So which leads me to the next question कि in your estimation, because both of you interact with companies a lot, Saad का बहुत ज़्यादा banking sector के साथ काम है, आप भी, मैं भी to some extent, what is your evaluation of the current conversation on spirituality in the workplace? Uska, how would you evaluate it कि हो रही है, and not just the workplace, in academia in Pakistan as well?
So, I wouldn't even limit it to the corporate world or to academia. I was thinking of some surgeons and big-time doctors that I know of. People who have achieved a lot, but who have this angst because they've achieved and now they're drifting. So they're just waking up, going to work, coming home, doing things, going about the motion, but not being very intentional. Because being intentional hurts because you haven't figured it out.
Very late, बड़ा मजेदार word आप introduce कर दिया. Intentionality का. I think spirituality also will lead to a very intentional life, जिसको आजकल हम modern times में living in the present की बात करते हैं. And I think that's
living in the present,
intentionality you're talking about.
Spot on. I mean, intentionality is not possible without identifying your purpose. What should I intend? If I do not know what my purpose is, then either I have automatic intentions. What should I intend? I mean, in this moment, if I have no higher value to aspire towards, then what should I intend? And that's the problem, and that's where the pain arises. I mean, most pains I've come across people, they said, what should I do? That's the question. And in the absence of that, then habit and automatic behavior takes over. And hence the problem of intentionality arises. But there's something interesting. If you don't know the purpose of your life, then knowing the purpose of your life is the purpose of your life.
ठीक है.
Till the time you're figured out, then knowing the purpose of your life, that's the purpose. That should be the ultimate purpose.
And like you said,
Yeah.
as long as you're on that journey, you'll still feel that there's some force that's driving you. It's, and आपने भी पहले बात की ना light वाली. That is the purpose is the light. आपने workplace में लोग होते हैं, they exude light. I think the purpose gives them.
Yeah. And if they, I mean, even if they haven't figured themselves out and they make this intention, and that's what all of us have at one point in our time have done. We need to figure ourselves out. What is the purpose of my life? And that's the question. So that question is my purpose.
लेकिन ये यहाँ पे conversation हो रही है कि नहीं? Academia में, workplace में, मुझे तो लगता है family, like you said ना, it's bigger than academia. मुझे लगता है families में भी नहीं हो रही. It's just absent.
Absolutely. Now, आप किसी organization में या what is the purpose of our organization? And suddenly ये conversation जब आती है ना, एक gloom emerge होता है, एक sadness emerge होती है, एक annoyance, trauma, bad memories. इस conversation में light नहीं कहीं emerge होती. That's why people don't want to have it. What's the purpose of our life? Because the reason is, and you guys have, and all of us have experienced it. That what is the purpose of life?
मूड खराब हो जाता है. मूड खराब हो जाता है. मैंने अक्सर देखा लोगों का मूड खराब हो जाता है कि ये क्या सवाल हुआ.
Yeah, and when they start to explore it, कोई अच्छे answers नहीं मिलते. And that's why people don't explore it. And that's the space we need. Organizations, how do they discover the purpose? Should be एक guided way होनी चाहिए to be able to help them, to be able to help the individual, to be able to help the organization. So that, and that guided way is the outcome of that leader.
And मुझे लगता है हम तीनों जो बात कर रहे हैं, you're not saying that we have the answers. हम खुद
seekers.
हाँ, and it's.
But we haven't arrived. But we know where to look now. In terms of the literature, देखें, किसी discipline के लिए 3 चीजें आपको चाहिए. तो आपने उसकी literature पढ़ी हुई है. We have read parts of the literature. How other people have been able to find it. So, and there is some method to it as well. And that's the method we need to discover. We need to talk about it in the academic circles. We need to talk about it till the time we figure it out. See, if we haven't figured the method out, and so then that should be the purpose of figuring it out. And my feeling is it is such an archaic question at the moment that we must start somewhere, even with minimal set of expectations, because the end goal is very important for us.
And this program जिसके ऊपर हम तीनों ही काम कर रहे हैं, we must start somewhere. तो ये इंशाल्लाह रमजान में Spiritual Lives of Leaders का जो program है, what's the talk to us a little bit about the.
Do you want to say something on that
program?
I think this conversation is the beginning of the starting point of what we hope the participants and we will together experience, right? So these will be some difficult questions and a lot of thinking, introspection, but hopefully the return to our workplaces would have changed us in some ways, and it would be the beginning. I don't think हम ये कह रहे हैं कि हम आपको PhD करा रहे हैं on this question.
And for me, it's also an opportunity to work with these people who come from these organizations and craft a framework that will help us have these conversations at a larger level. वो भी एक outcome है जिसपे मेरा बड़ा interest है कि those people are also committed, and how would we systematically bring the conversation of spirituality into the mainstream corporate sort of work life.
Absolutely. And I think hearing the two of my colleagues who are such excellent, they have excellent ideas about the nature of spirituality and how it should be brought to the workplace. My feeling is we'll have the state-of-the-art set of ideas that are available at the moment, given all the limitations. So that's what we would that's the space which we would be able to educate to the leaders of these organizations, that this is the state of the art. This is where we are. We're going to take it further, but we have to know. And if there is a program who's capable of bringing the state of the art and sharing that, I think the value added of that program would be significant. So imagine, I would want to share a small part of thousands of years of knowledge. And this is the collective tradition of humanity, right? Thousands of years of knowledge, and to be able to make it, to be able to make it workable and to be able to make it applied, that would be great. Not knowledge that has been discovered in the last 10 years or 15 years. We'll discover that, we'll share that as well, what has been discovered in the last 50 years. But we would also be sharing what has been discovered in the last thousands of years.
And एक बड़ी important distinction है, often corporate world में ना ethics की बड़ी बात होती है. And when they talk about spirituality, they reduce it to being ethical. I think what this program is about is much bigger than ethics. I think an ethical dimension of a spiritual person is a natural consequence of the states he is going for. So we are not, I think, talking about, ethically businesses में कैसे decisions करने चाहिए. But, we're talking about the whole individual. And ethics is just a small piece in that larger whole.
Because spirituality gives you the why should I do? Why should I be ethical in the first place?
For me, it just becomes trivial.
Yeah.
Being ethical becomes trivial if you're spiritually alive, and that conversation is very trivial.
Right.
For me.
Ethics becomes an automatic
inconceivable
behavior.
For me for a spiritual person who is living in constant awareness that Allah is watching me, him being unethical is just inconceivable. If he's reached that state, so the state is the goal, and him being ethical is just a consequence of that.
Right.
These are very interesting question that emerges, and let me share that with you, which places the discussion on spirituality and ethics in the proper context. Can a person with a good intention perform a bad action? Now, the scholars argue there is only one person with the best of intention can perform a bad action if his knowledge is incomplete. If the knowledge is complete, then there is no way on earth a good intention can produce a bad action. There is no way on earth. So the space of ethics is that space where it tells you, I need to do this, I need to do that, so I improve my knowledge. But the question of spirituality, it deals with the question of intention, and it deals with the why behind the ethics.
Excellent. So thank you very much. I am really looking forward to the 4 days we're going to spend together in Ramzan in the classroom. And
we hope to
Thank
see
you very
everyone
much.
there.
words from the two of you before we leave.
Just we hope to see you there, because we need, the three of us are just going to be a small part of the whole, and we're looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for organizing this. And we agree that we have just hit the tip of the iceberg. There is all these conversations need to be explored much more deeply. But thank you very much.
Thank you,
We'll
Adnan.
have future
for
conversations.
hosting us.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.